So I guess in short, I was someone that came into this program like fairly young and was also convinced that this program was bullshit, honestly. I was told that like I needed to go to a lot of meetings, and I was told that I need to get a sponsor. And I went to a lot of meetings and I got a sponsor, and I just kept getting high, like over and over and over. And there were some days where I even went to like 3 meetings. I had this one sponsor that he would just tell me, he's like, I'd leave a meeting and he's like, call me after the meeting. So then I call him, he's like, all right, go to another one. Luckily, I had like nothing going on in my life whatsoever because I was like a pretty bad junkie. And so like I just kept going, back to the meetings, but then I would leave and kind of, continue to use. And obviously, like, I don't think any of us start drinking or start using with the idea that it's going to get to this point. I think for me, probably like a lot of us, like, it was a lot of fun for a long time until it wasn't. And I remember, like, when someone took me through the steps, like when I first went through the steps, and the doctor's opinion, they kind of break down, this term that's referred to in this program, if you haven't heard it, is like the spiritual malady. But it's more so this, what the doctor like writes in the book is that he states that like alcoholics, or it applies if you're an addict as well, are restless, irritable, and discontent unless we can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once when we start drinking or using drugs. And I remember when I read that, there was a lot of identification that I had with that line, because I experienced that sense of the restless, irritable, discontent, like bored, anxious, uncomfortable, like separate then, it was like, I kind of always like, I don't know, I hung out with people growing up. Like, it's not like I didn't have like any friends, but it was just always uncomfortable to like be around people. Honestly, it started the first time I drank. I remember going back to school, like after the weekend, and people were like, man, like I had no idea you're so funny. Like, I had no idea you're so talkative. It was just like, I felt like I could kind of be myself, and I liked that. And it was like, I felt like all this fear that I had and nervousness went away when I would start drinking. And like, I started to make friends at these like weekend parties or whatever you want to call it. But, and then it's like things just continue to progress though, right? Like my drinking started leading me to messing with certain drugs. And then I don't know if you've seen that show Dope Sick. It was like a good representation of like my high school years, I feel like. If you haven't, I don't recommend watching it. At least watch it on your own kind of deal. But I mean, it's about Oxycontin. And, that was just my story. Like, pills started making their ways to parties. We didn't know what how severe they were. They felt really good. We started messing around with it. And then next thing you know, it's like that progression that it talks about. It's like, okay. And, my brother actually got hooked on them before me. And I remember thinking, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to be a lot more careful with this stuff. And it went from, this idea of like, all right, I'm just going to do it on the weekends to, okay, well, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like that's all technically weekends, and then it's like, okay, maybe a day during the week too. And it just kind of continued to progress till I was doing it like all the time, nonstop. And, long story short, it put me into a treatment center when I was 19 years old. I got separated from drinking and drugging and started going to a little bit of meetings, but that was really it. And I thought that at that time, like all I had to do was hang out with sober people and just not use. And like, that's what being sober was about. And like, it was some fun moments. Like I had some sober friends. I never really did much with like the 12 steps. I wasn't sponsoring anyone, I wasn't doing any of that sort of stuff. I remember just like, I almost got like a year sober, but during that time, I just literally started feeling more and more uncomfortable in sobriety. And it was weird because like all my family and friends would be like, great, Brandon, like you're sober now, like, like expecting me that I should be loving life. And it was just like, not, it was like, it was uncomfortable again. And it was like boring again because I had lost my solution. And so then I kind of went through that thing. Well, I was more on drugs, like maybe I can start drinking again. Within a short time, I was completely out of control and kind of led to this whole thing of like in and out of treatment centers for like 3 or 4 years of my life. I remember when I was about to admit to the last place, I almost didn't want to because I was like, what's the point? Because I had failed so many times and like I couldn't put together any time sober. And I remember thinking like, okay, like, of course, like my family was begging me and stuff. And I remember thinking, I was like, okay, I'll give it one more shot. And I went into a place. And actually, I wish I could tell you, and then I got sober, but actually relapsed again in the treatment center. But it was so weird. I remember they were about to kick me out of there. And I started to just like beg them. Like normally I wouldn't care, but I was like, please, like don't. I was like, just give me like one more shot, please. And I ended up talking them into letting me stay one more time. And I remember thinking like that night that I was like, I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do and whatever recovery tells me to do. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then I will never try to get sober again. And anyways, I remember there was this really like militant, like, you know, they call them sometimes like the big book thumper types, you know, guy that came into the treatment center. And I didn't really like him very much. But I remember I was like, for some reason, there was just something in me that was like, ask that guy to sponsor you. I went up to him and I asked him to sponsor me. He actually told me no, which kind of hurt my feelings, honestly, but told me no, but he had like all these sponsees. And so he hooked me up with like one of his buddies. Like, all I remember was they were very big on the 12 steps. And despite all my time in and out of recovery, I went to tons of meetings. I had tons of sponsors. I did all that sort of stuff, but I never worked the steps fully and I never sponsored any. And so like the guy met with me and he broke down this whole thing. It's like technically called the 3 legacies, but it's more or less like the circle and triangle symbol. And he explained like, this is the program of recovery. You're in the program if you're doing this stuff. And more or less you have like service, recovery, unity. But all that stuff means is like, am I actively working my my steps? Am I part of the fellowship? You know, do I have a home group? Am I connected to people? That sort of thing. And then service, he was very clear with me that like service is like, am I sponsoring people? Like all that other stuff is great, you know, like help people out, help set meetings up, take them down. But the way it was taught to me was just like, are you sponsoring guys? And I remember like, he asked me, have you ever done all 3 of these things at the same time? And I said, no. And he was like, so you really weren't working the program. So he's like, no wonder it didn't work. And I remember when he told me that, he was kind of an asshole a little bit, but I needed that at that time in my life. But I remember I had hope because I remember I thought that I knew what I was doing and I thought that I knew what AA was about. Yet he just sat there and told me that I wasn't doing it. I was just showing up to meetings expecting stuff to change. And so anyways, I got involved in the step work. And it was interesting during that process, I started to have other people be like, man, like you're different, like you're changing. And they would start to notice a change, but I still kind of felt the same. All I realized is I wasn't really thinking about getting high as much as I used to. But I'll never forget, this was the moment I truly had like this crazy, like spiritual experience, if you want to call it. We got to amends, which is step 9. I had a lot of amends and that, you know, and he told me I had to make like all of them. Like there was no amends. I mean, unless it was going to harm someone else, I needed to make that amends. And I had this amends to this old, I worked at Smoothie King. I used to lie and say I was the manager of Smoothie King, but I wasn't. I was just the oldest person that worked at Smoothie King at the time. I had a key to the store and I used to go in at night and steal money out of the register. And then, you know, do the thing that we do and like get in there and be like, oh my gosh, like, let me help you try to figure out who it was. And like, so anyways, I remember that I had to make this guy amends. So I called him and he lived like 40 minutes away. And I just felt like super motivated that morning. I was like, I want to make this amends. And so like, I figured that I'd probably taken like $600, you know, from the place. I mean, I was working the register at Target and I didn't have much money at the time. So I got out like $40 and I drove to his house. And I remember parking the car. This is going to sound, I swear I'm not psychotic. I closed the door and I started walking to the door and I felt like literally like something was moving me in that moment. Like I was terrified. And there was just something that was just kind of like working through me. And sure enough, like I ended up knocking on his door. I was like, hey, you know, that money that used to go missing, like that was me. I anticipate I stole this amount of money from you. I'd like to give you this amount now. We can set up payment plans every Friday. And I ended up making the amends. And then, you know, sure enough, meeting him afterwards until I had him paid off. But I remember getting back in my car and being like, what the hell is going on with me? Like, who am I? Because it was just like something that I was like, once I was always so terrified and fear would always like dominate and control me entirely in all my decisions and all my actions. And I just did something despite being terrified. And then it was like, I actually like gave a shit about trying to like make stuff right with other people. And I wasn't thinking about myself. And like, that's when it just kind of clicked. I was like, man, like something really is happening here. And so anyways, like I got into a men's, started working steps with other guys. And one of the things I want to say, like, this is just, I'll say it's my personal opinion, but I swear it's right. Some meetings will tell you like, you need a year to sponsor people. Like, don't listen to that. That's nonsense, honestly. Like if we would have waited a year to start sponsoring people, like we wouldn't have this program. Like no one early on was waiting a year. I think a lot of like, there's maybe this, some people think like in a year we'll be ready or whatever. But like the goal of a sponsor is not to be someone's like guru or mentor or like any of that. Like it's, I know how to work the steps. And so I know how to take someone else through the steps. Let's do this. And it was really that simple. So anyways, like I've done that and I've kind of taken off with it, you know, over the years. And listen, don't get me wrong. Like, it's not like, so I got sober, everything's perfect. Life happens, you know, very much. I've lost a lot of friends in sobriety. I went through a divorce in sobriety. I've went through several moves in sobriety, kind of leaving the fellowship I was comfortable with and moving to an area where I didn't know anyone. I've done a lot of uncomfortable and at times like painful stuff. But one thing that I do believe is that if I stay involved in those three parts that like I was telling you about, like sponsoring guys, doing my step work and being a part of the fellowship, that yes, I will experience pain at times, just as I will experience joy. But my mind will never tell me that it's a good idea to pick up to deal with something. And that's been my experience. And, you know, so that's kind of my message here tonight, because ultimately, like my hope here is that maybe someone hears something new or hears something that motivates them. Like if they haven't worked the steps or haven't sponsored someone to like really dive into it. Honestly, like that's what this thing is all about. This thing is getting to see like these, you know, what I call is not to be cheesy, but like these miracles. The fact that literally I am sober is a miracle. I'll even take it one step further. Like there's a part of me that wants to be like, well, I take credit. Like, look at all this stuff I've done. I remember growing up, I had like two best friends, these two guys, and neither of them are doing particularly well. And I wonder, I'm like, why am I? And I feel like in some level, I've just been lucky or blessed, whatever you want to call it, with the gift of willingness. And I think that that's something I'm truly grateful for, is that for whatever reason, at one point in my life, I became very willing to do this stuff. And as a way to pay it back, I try to find other guys that are willing. Some guys say they're willing. You'll find out a lot of people who say they're willing aren't willing. I was one of those people for a long, long time. But the people that, you know, but every so often, you'll see someone like David here who just something clicked and he worked, you know, him and his sponsor did some work. And man, like when he called me almost a year after meeting him, I was like, he's a different guy. And it's just like, it's such a cool thing that anyone here has access to if they do the work. So in saying that, I appreciate you all having me on. Thanks, David, for the call. If anyone needs a sponsor or anything like that, I'll put my number in the chat, or if not me, find someone else on here and, you know, see what this thing's about. You can always go back to what you're doing if you don't like it. Anyways, thanks. That's all I got.